What's up, guys? Welcome back. John Levesque here, and I am joined again by the man, Reza Dorrani. How you doing, sir?
Hello, John. I'm doing good. How are you doing?
I'm doing pretty well. I'm trying to stay inside and hide away from all this wildfire smoke, but other than that, I'm doing pretty good. How about you?
Same here. Trying to stay inside, trying to avoid going out as much as possible.
Yeah, it's crazy right now.
It's crazy times.
Yeah. Well, hey, for those of you guys that don't know Reza, he is a business applications MVP. He is a super user in our communities. He is all over the place on Twitter, making videos on YouTube and writing blogs. He is a content king. So we've done Expressions 101, we've done Expressions 201, and Reza is here to raise the bar again and bring us to Expressions 301. So if you want to see a deep intro on him, go ahead and check out 101, go ahead and check out 201, but for this one, we have a lot to cover, so I'm gonna hand it right off to you, Reza, to take it away, my friend.
Absolutely. All right, so let's begin with Expressions 301. Yes. Now the goal for Expressions 301 is to talk through some real world business use cases and how we can parse information, transform information, and use the power of expressions to truly take our flows to the next level. That's the goal of 301. Of course, if you have never worked with expressions before, as John mentioned, please go ahead and check out 101 and 201. That will give you the basics you need to get into 301.
Yeah, if you watch this without watching those, you're going to be in a world of confusion. Definitely go back.
So 301 is going to focus on some real world use cases. And before we get into that, the first thing I want to cover as part of today's session is going to be JSON. It's very important to understand JSON in Flow and how we can parse JSON in order for us to leverage this concept in all our scenarios. Now, the flow that I'm currently demoing right now is a very basic flow that triggers when a user clicks on a button manually. And in this flow, I have a JSON object that I have created, and this is what the JSON object looks like. Now, what is JSON? JSON is JavaScript object notation, and this is typically the output that you receive when you make calls to any data source or any service in Office 365 or even beyond. Now, for this example, I have a list of students that I am maintaining manually in my flow for now. The format here is the JSON format, and this is my list of students right here. Now, in this, I have a node called data. And this data node has a square brackets notation in front of it. That means anytime you notice that there is a square bracket notation, then we are dealing with arrays or we are dealing with collections. That's number one. That's the first key thing that you need to remember. Square brackets means arrays or collections. So in this node of data, I have a collection of students. Here's my first data node. Here's my second set, and here's my third set. So I have three students here, right here, Sabrina, Karen, and myself. So we have three students right here, and I have their information. And I have their first name, last name, address, and so on and so forth. That's the structure of the JSON right now that we are dealing with as part of this example. Now right here, I have a compose action in Flow that I have created, and in this, I have pasted that same JSON structure that I showed you earlier. So I have a JSON output that this compose action will provide to me. Now I will show you how we can leverage expressions to pass through the different items in that JSON structure. So the first use case is get me the first student's address. So the first student right here is Sabrina, and the address associated with Sabrina is 69756 Wendy Junction. So how do we grab this information from this JSON structure? So the way you do that through expressions is this. My expression is from the student's JSON object, which is right here. If you notice, I'm going to try and zoom in as well so we can see this clearly. So right here, I have my student's output. And from this, I have something called as question mark that I've put in. I'll explain to you what question mark is. Then I have this notation called data, right? Now, what is data? If I head back to my JSON object, right, this is what my JSON object is. And in this, I have a node called data. So that's the node that I'm grabbing right here. That's point number one. That's why the word data. The next thing is Within data, if you notice, data was an array, right? Remember, I showed you data begins with those square brackets. That means it's an array, it's a collection. If you want to fetch records from a collection, you can just put the node entry that you need. So if I need the first item, arrays begin from position 0. I have put position 0. If I need the object at position 1, then 1, and so forth, right? So right now, all I've done so far for my parsing is I've said, go and grab the data node, and in this, grab me the first object. Now, once I have the context of the first object, I want the address. So what do? Very simple. Once again, just put the address notation right here. So that's how I am parsing through my JSON object. I'm getting my JSON object, getting the data node, getting the first item of the array, and then getting the attribute address.
Man, I love how simple you make that. I feel like the first time I heard about JSON, I was like, wait, who's this Jason guy everyone's talking about? The way that you broke that down, I'm like, wow, this I could do this. It's funny. I don't mess with the JSON too often. Even I myself, I try and stay in the builder, but that just opened my mind even. So yeah, thank you.
So the goal here is, of course, the goal here is to understand JSON at the same time, not to make it too complex, right?
Yeah.
Yes. Once you see, I see a lot of folks who look at JSON, especially in the community forums, and they get confused around, a lot of questions are around JSON. How do I get this? How do I grab that data? It's actually very simple once you understand the structure of your JSON.
Yeah.
And in real world cases, once we get to the business cases, I'll show you how you can understand the structure based on the response that you receive, based on the actions that you query in Flow.
Very cool.
So right here, I've just gone ahead and grabbed my information, and that's my simple expression that I've put right here. Now, first things first, what is this question mark right here, right? Can I just not add this question mark, and will my expression be correct? Yes, it will still be correct. Your expression will still work. Now, when you put the question mark, what it basically does is it adds a null check to it. Okay, so it basically first checks to see if there is a node of type data. If that node is existing, only then the expression will move to the next part of my expression that I've defined right here. If I don't put the question mark, that means you are 100% confident that the JSON object that you're providing to this expression has this data points available for it. So if my JSON, let's say, has no data in it, this expression right now will fail. It will throw me an error, and your Flow will throw an error.
Yeah.
If you want to avoid that, best practice, always put question mark in between each attribute call that you're making to your JSON.
Nice.
So that's the reason why the question mark is in there. It's pretty handy.
Great tip.
Okay, so that's how you get the first student. Of course, I'll execute the flow and I'll show you how to grab the first student. Next thing is, let's say I want to filter all my students and I want to grab only those students where the email address contains yahoo.com. Okay, I have 3 students, one which has Yahoo, one has Gmail, one has Gmail. So 2 Gmails and 1 Yahoo. Now, how do I filter this? Now in Flow, there's an action called filter. And if you've never used this before, I'll show you how you can search for it. Just search for the word filter, and it's a data operation. It's called filter array. Now the key thing to understand about filter array is it requires an array, it requires a collection. You can't just give this a string or an integer. You cannot do that. It has to be an array. So in my scenario right here, if you notice, how do I give an array right here? Now, in my scenario, I have compose students, right? Compose students, if you look at the JSON again, is not an array. What's an array? The data node in compose students is an array. This is an array. Why? Because it has the square brackets right here. This is what I'm really interested in. So how do I get that information? And let me go to peak code to show you how I put that code in. I am basically using the same expression which says compose students. Once again, there's a question mark in there because I want to make sure that that node exists, and data. So I am giving it an array, which is my data node right here. And in this, I want to filter the array based on what? Based on the email attribute, right? Now, how do I grab the email attribute? It's very, very simple. In my object, I have email right here. So I need to go ahead and grab that. And the way you grab it is go to expression, and there's a function called item. Item basically gives you the current item in your loop or in your filter scenario. Okay, it gives you the context of the current running item in that filter scenario. So what I'm saying is, for that item, once again, I'm putting that same question mark, go grab me the email node. That's all I'm doing right here. That's my expression. And in this, I'm checking to see if this contains yahoo.com. So basically all I'm saying right here, go and filter my JSON based on the array provided in that data object, and then check to see if the email contains yahoo.com. And the output of this expression or the output of this action is also another array. And then I'm just trying to see how many students have the email yahoo.com. Very simple. I'm going to use another expression called length. We've used this before in expressions 101 and 201. There's a function called length, and all it expects is an array, and I'm giving it the output of my previous action. As simple as that. Let's go ahead and test this. Of course, this action that I just added needs to be removed because it's empty. So let's go ahead and run this flow, and let's now look at this flow in action. So my flow got triggered. The first step is my JSON, and this is how my JSON looks like. I put this in Visual Studio Code, so we already know the structure. Now I need the first student address, which is right here. It should output 69756 Wendy Junction, and that's exactly what it outputs right here. So it went through and parsed through the JSON. Then my filter action, go and give me all the students where the output is yahoo.com. The output right here, and this is brand new in Flow as well now, you have this show raw outputs. If you just click on this, it will give you the full output. So I can just copy this and go ahead and paste it in Visual Studio Code so I can see my JSON structure clearly. So if you notice, the only student with yahoo.com was Sabrina. It's gone ahead and grabbed that student object. And in this, I then ran the length function to check how many students have yahoo.com, because my data node, which is my object right here, the body, only has one item in the array. The length will return 1, and that's the output that we see right here.
Beautiful.
Very simple, very straightforward, very basic example of parsing through JSON. And these are very common scenarios that you're going to run into. You will filter your objects. You will want to count how many items are there in my object, or based on a filter criteria, you would like to count how many items are there in your arrays.
Totally. This makes a lot of sense. I have teachers asking me right now, I'm trying to help them, and they're like, how can I send weekly reports for my grade book? Yep. Right? This is a way that you could do that.
Okay. Now that we've seen this, now let's take some real world use cases. So the first case is right here. I have a application called Help Center, wherein users come in and put in requests. They put in ticket information related to a help desk application. The data currently is being stored in SharePoint as a data source. The second thing is, when a user comes in and they try to create a ticket, they have to select a category associated with the ticket. Now, these categories are also being driven from another data source, which is again a SharePoint list. And for each category, I have defined a set of approvers. Okay? So the use case here is, users come in and create a ticket in my system, pick a category. I am dynamically defining my approvers, and I have a flow that will basically begin an approval process the moment a ticket request comes in. And then once the approval process is complete, it will track the entire approval process. Not just that, it will log the approval history. Very, very important. Why approval history in Flow is only valid for 28 days if you're not aware of this. So you will lose your approval histories. So make sure you log them. That's what this flow is going to show you how to do that. Not just that, we will also write expressions to calculate how long did approver 1 take, how long did approver 2 take, what was their response, when did they take their response. All that metadata information that's available as part of Flow, I'm going to grab all of that and I'm going to store it in my system of record.
Amazing. This is, okay, cool. This is something that gets asked for a lot, dynamic approvers. So I'm actually excited to see how you handle this.
Let's check this out. So let's go through this process. Now, the key here is to understand expressions. Remember, the use case is simple, but the goal here is to show you where I'm using expressions, because without the expressions, it would not be possible for me to perform this kind of a scenario. So here we go. I'm going to create a very simple ticket in my ticketing system right now. So let's say I'm having an issue with phone connectivity. So I'm going to say, yeah, I'm having an issue with my phone connectivity. This is a medium priority ticket. I pick a due date for my ticket. My phone is not working. And I now need to pick a category for my ticket. Now, this is what the user picks. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and pick facilities.
Okay.
I'm basically creating a ticket and notifying my facilities department that I'm having an issue with my phone.
Okay.
Please note, this is SharePoint. If you don't like the look and feel here, we can even modify this using Power Apps and we can make this shine even further.
Yep.
Okay.
Or a form or whatever front end you want.
Whatever front end you want. And honestly, whatever back end you want as well. And this example is just SharePoint. You can have any back end you desire.
Yep.
Okay, so let's go ahead and click on save. Now, the moment I do this, this is my ticket that's got logged in the system. All my data points are right here. And these little UI elements that you see here, this is actually SharePoint list formatting. So there's nothing special about this, very easy to set these up. And the first thing is, observe that the status of the ticket is new because this was a newly created ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the moment the ticket is created, I have a flow that kicks off. So I'm just waiting for the flow to run. Let me first show you the process, then I'll break down and show you how the flow works. So just waiting for the flow to trigger. All right, so as you can see, my status of my ticket, that is phone connectivity, has changed to pending. And not just that, there's a section called comments, and it says that the approval was started by the name of the user who started this process, which is me, at this date and this time. So it's actually grabbing the date and time in my time zone and applying that in SharePoint in a readable format through expressions. I'll show you how later. So that's step number one. Also, it will dynamically assign the approvers. Now I picked facilities as my category. So the approvers are Sarah and James. I have two approvers. Now I will log in as one of my approvers. And in this case, I am logging in with my approver, which is James. In this case, I'm showing you approvals through Teams. And I'll show you how I did this as well in my flow, by the way. So I have that approval card going out directly to that approver in Teams dynamically through my flow. And in this case, let's say my first approver comes in and says, yes, approve. This is a valid issue, working on it, right? Yeah. And they click on submit. So the first approver comes in and takes the approval decision. At the same time, there's a second approver as well. And this time I'll show you how to do approvals through the email.
Nice.
Through the email option. So this is my second approver, which is Sarah. And how did Sarah and James come about? Dynamically through my flow by reading the category. And let's say Sarah also comes in and says, yes, this looks fine. Or maybe Sarah says, no, I'm going to reject this, not an issue. And Sarah submits this.
Sarah's tough, man.
So both Sarah and James have taken their approval decisions. And now if I head back to my SharePoint list, notice what happened right here. Because Sarah rejected it, it changed the status to rejected immediately. Not just that, what I want you guys to observe right here is the approval commands. Now let me try and open this and grab the approval commands right here. Maybe I can just add it so we see the approval commands in action. All right, right here are the approval commands. Now, notice the approval process was started by Reza at this date and this time. That got logged. Then what happened? Then there were two more approvals that took place. Both of them need to be logged. So here it tells me that James approved it at this date and this time. It took James 1 minute to approve. So remember, it took me 1 minute to take that approval decision. So I can even track and see how long did each approver take to take their decision, something that many people ask for. And the way I did that is honestly through expressions and through understanding the JSON that I get from the output of the approval action. And that's why it was very important for us to learn about the JSON first. So I'll show you now what we do here.
Hold on, real quick. Just, I want everyone to appreciate the formatting of your comments. Like, look at how much character those emojis add, right? Like they give this life. They give this something that somebody can look at and appreciate rather than just raw text, raw data. That's phenomenal. Even above and beyond the coolness of how this works and what's behind the scenes, the formatting of how you create things like this matters too. And so I really appreciate those little touches.
Thank you, John. It's important to add that extra touch.
It is. It makes people want to interact with the things you're creating.
Exactly. And it's a visual cue, right? It's a visual cue. I can clearly see this is rejected. Honest, SharePoint is giving me the visual cue, but even the commands, I can immediately focus on who rejected it thanks to the emoji right here.
Yep.
When did they reject it? How long did they take, right? I can grab all that information through my process.
Cool. Let's see how it's made.
Now let's see how this flow is made. So here's my flow. Yes, the flow is long, but I will walk through the different steps quickly.
Okay.
So the first step is, of course, the trigger of my flow, which is when an item is created in my list, which is help desk. Simple, straightforward. Step number 2. I am creating certain variables that I need because I'm going to try and hold this information in my flow so I can leverage this later on in my actions. My first variable is a variable of approvers of type string. Remember, variables are strongly typed.
Yep.
Second, variable approvers, which is an array. So I have a string variable and an array variable. And then I have a comments variable of type array. This is where I'm storing all that comments history. And I'll show you how I'm doing that later on in this flow.
And those 3 actions right there are an initialize variable.
Initialize variable.
Yep.
Yes, these are the initialize variable actions. Once I grab this, the next step is I need to go and get my approvers first. Remember, my approvers are dynamically getting defined from a different list. How do I grab this?
So cool.
I am using the get items action right here, just querying the departments list. And here I'm using a very simple filter query which says, go get me all those departments where the title is equal to the category that the user has selected in the form. Okay. I will show this in run mode as well so we can evaluate the JSON. But right now I'm just showing you the breakdown of the flow.
Yep.
Once I get the departments, now the key thing is, if you notice the departments, even the approvers is technically an array. You know why? Because this is a multi-select approval column, and this is a people picker column in SharePoint. So how do I grab the email addresses? Because when you create an approval in Flow, you need to get the email addresses and they have to be semicolon separated. That's the base premise of adding approvals in your approval action. Back to my flow. So the next step was, how do I get the email IDs? I am running an apply to each loop for every item that I get as part of this query. Remember, the output of get items is always an array, so I will have to loop through that. Then I am looping through each approver. Why? Because the approval column is multi-select, so even that is an array. As I'm looping through it, I am going through and grabbing what? The email of that approver. Why? Because I need that. And I'm putting that in an array, one by one by one, by using another action called append to array. And I'm just picking the array variable and just putting in the approvers one by one. Once I do that, I have another action in Flow called the join, where you can give an array and you can join them by any text that you want. I could have even written this as an expression. There's an expression for join as well, but thanks to Flow, they've given that as an action, so I don't need to write an expression. Why reinvent the wheel?
Yep.
So here's my array, and I'm just asking it to join by semicolon. This will give me the semicolon list of email IDs of my approvers dynamically. And the next step is I'm just setting my string variable now, remember data types, to the output of this join action. So I get my string of my approvers, and this is how I dynamically grab my approvers.
Wow.
Once I grab this, I am updating my existing item in SharePoint. I'm setting the status to pending. And this is where I put in my first comments in my approval log. A little bit of emoji work right here, literally just copy pasted it from the web.
Nice.
The approval started by the person who created it, and here's an expression. And this expression was something that I showed in the previous modules as well. So go and check that out. Convert from UTC. Remember, Flow only understands dates and times in UTC format.
Yep.
So go get the created date of what? Of my item, and convert it into Pacific time, because I'm working in the Pacific time zone, and formatted to look like this: month, day, year, hour, minute, time. And that's why the formatting in the output right here shows me the month, the day, the year, and the time. That's because I have formatted it. You can apply any formatting of your choice right here.
So cool.
Once I'm done with this, I'm using the create and approval action. And this is where I'm applying that variable to dynamically define my approvers. No hard coding right here. Once I create my approval action, I have written this additional step here to post an adaptive card to Teams. Now, not many people know, but the approval action actually spits out a property called adaptive card. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Just use this action and post it as an adaptive card. So if you noticed, I took one of the approval decisions in Teams. That's happening through here.
Nice. I have a whole video on that. If you want to see approvals through adaptive cards and Teams, I'll put the link.
Next step, of course, I'm waiting for the approval. This is where I wait for both my approvers to take their decision. Now, once they take their decision, my next step is I am going through each response. Now, what is responses? Responses is the output of the approval action, and we're going to look at that JSON right now. In there, responses is an array. So for each of those responses, what I'm doing next is I am going and performing, it looks complex, but it's very simple. I'll show you how. I am appending text to the array of comments, right? So now I need to get the response of my approver and append it. So the first step is I have a expression right here, and this expression is an if expression. So I'm checking to see something. I'm checking to see if the response of the approver was approved or rejected, right? So what did the approver say? If the approver said approved, go ahead and put approved with my emoji. If they said rejected, go put rejected. Notice I'm not writing a condition and I'm writing those additional branching logic. I don't have to do that. I can do the branching logic right here within one action by writing expressions. And here's a very simple expression which uses the if function. Once I get that, once again, I needed the date and time. Same expression again, convert from UTC, get the completion date, convert it to Pacific, convert it to your time zone. Next, how do I get the time? How do I get how long the approver took to give me the response? Now, unfortunately or fortunately, in Flow, there is no direct way of getting that. There is a function called ticks, T-I-C-K-S. So if I go to list of functions, and if I search for ticks, T-I-C-K-S, and if I click on this, ticks basically gives me the 100th nanosecond interval from a previous date. So it basically gives you nanosecond intervals. Now, I don't want to confuse you guys. Just think about it that ticks gives you a number based on a peculiar date. Just think about it like that. It just gives you a number as a response based on a peculiar date.
This was a crazy one for me to understand also. When I first heard about this, I'm like, why? There's got to be a better way.
But there is not a better way right now.
There's not, yeah.
You know, I have a blog post on this that I posted in the community forum. So I will grab that link as well and give it to Joe. So we'll have it in the description of this video.
Perfect.
So I won't spend much time on this, but basically all I'm doing right here is writing expressions to check the interval between how long the approver took to respond and when was the approval action assigned to that approval. And this is what does that calculation. Of course, there's a lot of maths here, 100 and divide by this and multiply by this. Is basically some time calculations going on here to give me the exact time in minutes that the approver took. And that is what I'm plugging in right here. And finally, of course, once I'm done with my approval array, I'm again joining it with a space because I wanted to space out my approval actions or the approval comments. And then at the end, I'm checking to see the response, whether it was rejected or approved. And based on that, I'm just going ahead and setting my status.
Man, I feel like, wow. That's like, I just feel like I sat through a lesson on like how to create a symphony. Like that was it was like a master class. Wow. That is a beautiful flow.
Thank you. And when we run this flow, all I wanted to show you guys was this. So the create and approval action, we'll just look at one thing. The create and approval action, we are going to focus on the body attribute that it spits out. So I'm going to copy this. Of course, there's not a lot of space here. So I'm just going to copy this. I'm going to open Visual Studio Code and paste it here. Now, what is this? This is a JSON, once again, right? Now, all the skills that we applied earlier in understanding how we can traverse through JSON, now we can understand this. Now, if I need to know how many approvers were a part of the process, very easy. Just get this node. This will tell me how many approvers were a part of the process. Perform a length operation on this. There are two objects. If I want to know what was Sarah, so all that information is available right here. Okay. The adaptive card is also right here, right? The properties are available for you. And once I hit wait for an approval, this also has the response of my approvals. Now let's check the outcome of wait for an approval. This is again an array of responses, right? So these were the responses. Now I can traverse through this, get the individual responses. So Sarah said rejected, and here is Sarah's comments. This is what I'm actually traversing through in my function.
Sarah, so rude.
Yeah, she's rude. So all that information is available right here for you to capture and grab. And when I calculated the time aspect, all I'm grabbing is the request date, which is when did this request go out to Sarah, and the response date, when did Sarah respond? And then I wrote that function for ticks, which calculates the difference in minutes to check how long did Sarah took to respond. Same thing goes for James, and so on and so forth. So understanding JSON is extremely, extremely important in traversing through outputs of not just approvals, but any scenario of your choice.
And understanding it can help you build epic approvals like you just saw.
All right,
Cool.
Thank you. Let's get to use case number 2. Now I have tied use case number 2 very closely with use case number 1.
Okay.
Now, whenever a ticket gets created, there is a unique ID associated with my ticket. So as you can see, for this ticket that just got created, the ID of the ticket is ticket number 19. Now, many a times there are requirements wherein I want to send an email out with a particular subject, a particular body available, maybe attachments in it. And I would like the email, once it comes in, I would like to grab all that information that the email has and then apply some logic to it and maybe grab my attachments from my email and push it right here into my system if the ID of my help desk matches.
Nice.
Very common use case again.
Yeah.
So first, let's look at the flow in action. This is my flow. And what this flow is doing is whenever a new email arrives and that email needs to have a subject that looks like this, help desk ticket, right? If the email subject contains this subject and it has attachments, then in that case, I'm going and grabbing the ticket number based on some logic. And I'll show you once we run this flow, I'll show you what that logic is. Once I do that, I'm basically going and grabbing my help desk item based on the ticket number that is provided in the email. And then I go and grab each and every attachment that I get as part of the email and I'm appending it to that item. So let's look at this one in action. I'm going to log in as a different user and I'm going to send an email to that email address. In my case, the email address is Reza's email address. Here is my subject. Now, as part of my subject, I need to also define what my ticket number is. So in this case, it's ticket number 19. So let's get back to that user's email and let's put ticket number 19. And maybe I'm going to provide some sample text as part of the body. And I will go ahead and attach a file. I will grab a file. And of course, I can add additional attachments. I'm going to hit send. So I've basically sent an email that has a peculiar format associated with it. And I'm also attaching a file and sending that file out. Now, once that information comes into the system of record, this flow will trigger. So I'm waiting for the flow to trigger. And as you can see, 9 seconds ago, this flow has successfully run. And what this flow is going to do is if I head back to SharePoint, you see ticket number 19, there's a small change that took place. You see attachments, it shows you that there's an attachment now.
Nice.
If I select this, you see there's a file attached. And the file has a naming standard that it is following. Plus, if I click on it, I can actually look at that file. By the way, shameless promotion of my upcoming webinar as well.
Get registered. Get registered.
So as you can see that an email came in that had a peculiar format, it had attachments, and somehow there was a flow that was waiting or listening for an email to come in with a peculiar format. It picked all that information and pushed it to my system of record. Sure. Now let's see how we did this. So this flow, let's look at how this flow executed. So an email came in and the first thing that I did is I grabbed the ticket number. Now ticket number is a variable I created here of type integer. And the next step is I am setting that variable and I grabbed that number out. I'll show you how through the expression later, but I grabbed the exact number from my subject. So it was help desk ticket 19. I grabbed the number 19. Why? Because that's what I'm interested in, the ticket number. Then I queried my SharePoint list and I passed that ticket number that I grabbed from my email. So ticket number 19, go get me that SharePoint item. And once I got the context of the SharePoint item right here, all I had to do was loop through all my attachments as part of the email and one by one start uploading them to that SharePoint item. Wow. Now let's look at where we used expressions. So first, right here is my first expression. I have a variable that I created of type integer. Now when a new email arrived in my mailbox, the subject that I received as part of the output property, the subject property is of type text, but I need the ticket number in the form of integer. This is another very common request that I see on the forums. And in fact, I saw a lot of comments in our 101 and 201 series as well. How do I translate something from one format to a different format? Right? Now, if I go back to the flow run, once again, JSON is very important to understand, guys. My trigger action has an output, which is of type JSON. So I'm going to grab this. And of course, the JSON is going to look a little daunting. And the way you format this is Control A, Alt, Shift, and F, and it's formatted, so it's no longer confusing. Now let's see, how can I grab the subject? So here's my subject, guys. Help desk ticket 19. Remember, this is what I'm interested in, the subject. How do I grab this through expressions? Let's check this out. Back to my flow. So right here, if you notice, first thing is I am performing a loop through something known as a value node. Now, if I try and zoom in right here, and if I hover on this, look at the expression behind this. It says trigger body question mark value. Now, why value? Remember, apply to each needs an array. So if I head back right here, value right here is the array, right, from the body. This is the array it needed. So it got the array, which is perfect. Now from this, how do I grab the subject? Now, first thing, I am grabbing the subject right here by using that same concept I showed you earlier, question mark subject. And what is subject? Subject is the node that is available as part of this object right here. So I have grabbed the subject. Perfect. So I got help desk ticket 19. Now, as part of this, I am interested in that number 19. Next, I'm performing a split action. I'm splitting that string by a space. Why am I splitting a string by a space? Because if I head back to my subject, it is help desk space ticket space the number 19. So now when you split, you get an array. So I've got an array of 3 strings, help desk, ticket, and 19. Why? Because I split it in that format. Now, once I did that, once I was able to split it, the next step is I am actually going ahead and executing another function that I showed you earlier. I'm getting the array sitting at position 2. Why position 2? Because this is position 0, this is position 1, and this is position 2. Right? I'm just using my same concepts that I applied earlier. So I get that number 19. Also, this is of type string. You see, there's double quotes around it. It's a string. I need to make it into an integer. So what do? Just use the integer function and encapsulate it with an integer. That's all I had to do. So it looks a lot of work. Yes, it is. But in order for you to parse things, you need to understand how you perform the different actions, right? How do I grab that node? How do I split it based on the different elements that I'm interested in? How do I grab the number of my node? How do I convert a string to an integer? 4 expressions in one. This is a combo type of an expression, a little bit more advanced, but that's what I had to do to grab that ticket number. And once I have that ticket number, everything else after that is literally seamless because I'm storing it in a variable. I'm just going ahead, getting the SharePoint item based on that ID, and then just looping through the attachments that I have as part of my email and starting to upload them one by one to my SharePoint list.
Man, it's so good. I love how, like, so it's if you know this stuff, if you understand JSON and how it works, this looks so easy. And I just love how you really can just methodically go through it and lay it out. You can tell that you completely understand the system, and the way that you communicate it makes it very understandable. I can see why everybody was so ravenous for a 3rd episode of this, because, like, to be honest, like, you're teaching me right now as well. All of this is new information for me as well. And so I'm actually very excited because I feel like there's a couple use cases where I can already use a couple of these things.
Great.
All right. So I think we have one more. You got one more use case?
We have one more. Well, it's the 3rd use case is actually just another example of how you can parse through things. So
okay.
One more use case.
Cool.
This one I've kept it relatively simple, so it's not getting data from any connector as such. But you can think about the use case here. Let's say I receive an email, and this is what my email body looks like right here. Right? Many a times, email body is free form text. Many a times, right? It's just free form text that users put in data. And my use case here is, let's assume I get an email that looks like this. In this, right, I have assigned by Reza Dorrani on this date and this time. Now, let's say I'm interested in grabbing certain pieces of information out from this text. How do I do something like that? Okay. So in this case, the first thing is I'm again using a split function. And the reason why I'm using split is because I'm trying to split this text by what? By a new line character, because I want each and every line to be a separate item in an array so I can handle them one by one.
Nice.
That's the first thing I need to do. Now, in split, there is no way for you to define a new line character. Yeah, I can define a space, but how do I define a new line character? Well, one expression for this as well. This expression is called decodeUriComponent, and this is the character code for a new line component or for a new line character.
Whoa. Okay, cool. This is way beyond. That's awesome. Okay.
So again, for folks who understand character codes, they will be very familiar with this. If not, when you want to work with a new line character, just use this formula.
I love it.
decodeUriComponent %OA, and just use this, and this will give you a new line object. And right here, I'm trying to split my output of this action, which is my email body. Think about it as my email body. I'm splitting this with that new line character. Cool. Now, once this runs, I will receive an array. An array of what? An array of all of these items individually. Once I get that array, next step, this is something I showed you earlier in the demo as well. I am using the filter function. So I'm using that same split function here. Remember, filter array needs an array. It needs a collection. This is just a string. By splitting it, I get my collection. Once I get my collection, the next step I'm using is I'm checking to see if the item in the array starts with assigned by. Maybe that's what I'm interested in. I'm just interested in things in my email body where it says assigned by. So I'm checking to see whether the array contains anything that starts with another function assigned by. And remember, I'm using the same item property again. If that is equal to true, now please note, I notice a lot of folks making this mistake. True, this is actually text. This is called true as a text. Starts with as a function returns you a Boolean value, true or false. I need to compare this to a Boolean. When you want to work with Boolean values, you have to go to expression and plug in true or false. So there's a difference between typing true, which is a string, and using expressions. So in this case, I'm actually checking the Boolean value. Now this filter array will look through this random text and search for all those items that begin with assigned by. There's only one, so it should grab this line for me. Once it grabs that line for me, the next step what I'm executing is once again some little array parsing. I know there's only one line and I'm probably just interested in that line. So what do? I use the output of my filter action. And what is this? Give me the first item of my array. Why? 0. No question mark. That means I'm always expecting that value to be there. So may not be safe. Best practice. I purposely did this. Put a question mark in here. Okay. And then how do I grab additional data points? Maybe I'm interested in the date. More expressions. Use split. Get the array, split it by commas, get the first node, split it by colon, get me the first value. Why am I doing all this? Because this is the structure I have in that string. So however you have your data defined, you can parse through it based on all these powerful expression formulas that are available. Now let's go ahead and run this and see this in action. Okay, running this. All right. So first things first, here's my new line character. You see, it put the new line based on that formula that I put in. Next thing, this is my text that I get, sample text. Let's say it comes from email, it comes from your data source of record, could be anywhere. Next step, remember my split function. I was splitting by what? A new line character. Now what do I get? I get an array. An array of what? An array of strings. So you see every line, including the space, is being put out right here in the array. And how do I know this is an array, guys? The square brackets. Remember, notations. Then I'm filtering my array. What did I filter by? Where the text begins with assigned by. So what should be the output? Just one item again in an array. You see the array? Here's my item. It's the filter. Next step, grab me the first item of the array, which is a string. Now notice, I don't have the array symbol around it. It's different. This is an array. Then I wrote the formula to grab me the first item. So it grabs me this. And then I wrote some additional expressions to just get the name of the person whom the task is assigned. I wrote some functions in there and I got my output, which is Reza. I could have easily got the date. Maybe that's a task that I want to create in Planner. You can use the Planner action, grab the name, grab the assigned date, due date, assign task in Planner.
I feel like I need to breathe. I'm like, wow, I'm hot. Holy cow. That was Wow, Reza, man, that was incredible. That was really, really good. I mean, so many great tips along the way, all the new skills, and I love how you consistently went back to why the bracket here, because it's data. What's that mean? It's right, it's inside the array, breaking down objects and all of that. Man, wow. Wow. Okay. I am going to go ahead and leave everyone with a couple of thoughts. So first things first, go follow Reza. You thought this was a master class. He does this all the time. Go check out his YouTube channel. Go follow him on Twitter. And I'm also going to put the link down below for his master class. If you want to sign up and get to pick his brain and learn all of this to a greater degree, that's going to be an amazing opportunity for you. It's limited spots. I would act right away and get in so that you can have this experience. I'm blown away, man. Thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for putting this in a way that's so understandable. I know the effort it takes to be able to compartmentalize these thoughts and present them in such a way. So really appreciate you being here and putting in such effort to make such a high quality presentation, man. This was epic.
Thank you, John. Thank you for giving me an opportunity to come on your YouTube channel and give me such a great platform to actually showcase these different scenarios. So thank you as well.
My pleasure. All right, you guys know what to do. Click like, click subscribe, go follow Reza and all the things. Check the description. We're going to have lots of links. I'll even try and have him put some of these expressions in text form so you can easily copy them out. We'll get you hooked up. So go ahead, check it out. Go follow Reza. Much love from me, everybody. I'll see you in the next one.